Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's session, where we'll explore a cutting-edge development in the treatment of non-small cell lung cancer. Today's talk will focus on Olvi-Vec, an innovative oncolytic vaccinia virus currently in phase 2 development as part of the VERO-25 clinical trial. The VERO-25 clinical trial is an open-label, randomized study evaluating the efficacy and safety of IV-delivered Olvi-Vec. This trial is investigating whether Olvi-Vec can resensitize advanced or metastatic non-small cell lung cancer patients, those who have experienced disease progression after first-line platinum doublet chemotherapy combined with an immune checkpoint inhibitor. Olvi-Vec's mechanism of action directly targets tumor cells while improving the tumor microenvironment, potentially enhancing sensitivity to subsequent therapies. With a manageable safety profile demonstrated in early studies, this trial aims to confirm its potential to revolutionize treatment approaches in non-small cell lung cancer. Interim data is expected in mid-2025. Now, guiding us through this exciting research is Dr. Patrick Ford, a globally recognized leader in the thoracic oncology space. He completed his training in internal medicine and oncology at Ireland before undertaking a fellowship at Johns Hopkins. He has served as co-director in the Division of Upper Aerodigestive Malignancies in the Department of Oncology and directed multidisciplinary thoracic oncology research programs at Johns Hopkins. Dr. Ford has also spearheaded clinical translational research programs focused on immuno-oncology of upper aerodigestive malignancies, including lung cancer and mesothelioma. His groundbreaking work has led to the development of multiple phase 3 trials, and notably the FDA approval of a new adjuvant chemoimmunotherapy for surgically inoperable lung cancer in 2022, following publication in the New England Journal of Medicine. Now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Patrick Ford as he shares his expertise and insights into Olvi-Vec and its transformative potential in non-small cell lung cancer treatment. And with that, let's start our discussion. Thank you, Dr. Ford, for joining us today and having a discussion really around what we are seeing within the space of non-small cell lung cancer in the ongoing research and how it may have efficacy in platinum resensitization and otherwise. As we've discussed through the introduction, there's been a lot going on in the space, but I think it would be best to start off by discussing where are the current options and what's available to those with recurrent non-small cell lung cancer.
Okay, well, good to be here with you today, Ankit, to discuss this topic. I think the treatment of recurrent non-small cell lung cancer is a very hot topic at the moment in terms of drug development and development of new therapies for patients with lung cancer. We had a lot of developments in lung cancer between 2010 and 2020 in terms of the development of immune checkpoint inhibitors and novel targeted therapies. Many of those have moved to the first-line treatment of lung cancer now. So we do have good options for most patients who are diagnosed newly with lung cancer, which has not been previously treated. One of the challenges, however, is when a patient's tumor becomes resistant to immunotherapy. And that's probably the majority of patients. So we treat 70% or so of patients upfront with some form of immune checkpoint inhibitor combination or monotherapy. And of that 70%, probably 60% plus will eventually develop resistance, be that in a short period of time or in a longer period. And really, the main options for those patients at the moment are really single-agent chemotherapy with docetaxel in the absence of an actionable genomic alteration where we can use a targeted therapy. And docetaxel is a long-standing drug. It's been used in this setting for about 20 years at this point, and unfortunately is modestly effective, I would say, and is associated with fairly significant toxicity for patients. So I think in the field of lung cancer drug development, we're really looking for new options for patients with recurrent non-small cell lung cancer, particularly those with either primary or acquired resistance to immunotherapy.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that with a lot of these patients, once they have progressed to a certain level, we go into the docetaxel, but even further so, there's become resistance there, and then we're really at a lack of options. I think what's really interesting is some of the data that has come out from the oncolytic space, specifically Olvivec, and a part of our discussion today is really where we're seeing maybe more of the oncolytic virus, how it can work mechanistically to those patients who are, let's call it, beyond the checkpoint inhibitor and docetaxel and have developed resistance, and how we could see a potential for something with platinum resensitization as well as in combination with a checkpoint and seeing where these patients may lie. So it would be great maybe if you can explain a little bit more mechanistically how that would work and how that would achieve for patients.
Well, the majority of patients who don't have an actionable genomic alteration are treated up front with a combination of platinum doublet, chemotherapy, and an anti-PD-1 antibody for non-small cell lung cancer. And those patients, as I mentioned earlier, will eventually develop tumor resistance, usually while on immunotherapy and monotherapy. But it hasn't been extensively explored in lung cancer, the concept of re-challenging the tumor with a platinum doublet. However, what data we do have available suggests that relatively few patients would have a response to a platinum doublet. The idea of oncolytic viruses and Olvivec, so specifically, is that it may convert immune cold tumors into hot tumors. And by hot tumors, I mean those tumors which have tumor infiltrating lymphocytes, because one of the main drivers, we think, of resistance to anti-PD-1 immunotherapy and also to other forms of immune therapy is simply absence of tumor infiltrating lymphocytes within the tumor microenvironment. There's also the idea that oncolytic viruses, including Olvivec, may help to re-induce tumor neoantigen expression, and the presence of neoantigens within the tumor is felt to be necessary to drive a T-cell response. Secondly, there is the idea that perhaps with platinum doublet and other forms of chemotherapy, you can have immunogenic cell death. And when you put those two things together, the idea of an oncolytic virus perhaps re-inducing a hot tumor, and at the same time, you then retreat the patient with a platinum doublet, you potentially can have a synergistic mechanism there, and eventually leading to platinum resensitization and perhaps a sustained response then to continued immune checkpoint inhibitor. And that's the concept of the particular trial we're discussing today in lung cancer.
I think that's very insightful. And when we're even looking at this trial as a whole and exploring the, let's call it, more later stage patients, those who are looking towards something like Olvivec or an oncolytic virus, do you anticipate any large differences in the trial compared to a traditional therapy?
Well, I think the main differences here, I mentioned earlier, our current standard of care for patients. So, for example, a patient treated with, say, platinum doublet chemotherapy for either non-squamous or squamous lung cancer, and then along with a PD-1 inhibitor, the most commonly used PD-1 inhibitor in the US in that setting would be pembrolizumab. The patient then perhaps goes on to maintenance pembrolizumab and develops progression. The patient's option at that point really is to move on to docetaxel, and docetaxel is associated with a relatively high rate of chemotherapy type side effects. So things like fatigue, low blood counts, risk of infection, peripheral neuropathy, hair loss. So I think a key potential differentiator here is the different side effect profile. So Olvivec, from what we know so far, particularly from studies in ovarian cancer and also emerging data from small cell lung cancer, is associated mainly with kind of more immune type side effects and more acute side effects, things like pyrexia, perhaps some nausea, but not so much those traditional chemotherapy side effects. And ironically, platinum doublet chemotherapy, so for example, if you were to give a patient Olvivec in the context of a trial and then retreat with platinum doublet, most oncologists would feel a platinum doublet would be more tolerable than docetaxel, for example. in terms of the side effect profile. So I think a big difference here potentially is less toxicity for patients. The other key element is re-inducing that immune response, and also the platinum resensitization. So you're having potentially two mechanisms which may benefit the patient in terms of tumor regression.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up a great point, even from the ovarian cancer trial. I think one of the KOLs that was on our last discussion mentioned that, this is a very fragile patient population on the ovarian side. And I think this translates well over into this current trial. And a few of the patients there that were discussed were quite fragile, but after Olvi-Vec were able to not only progress onto therapy on the platinum side, have a greater side effect profile, as you're mentioning, with the platinum doublet, but also, interesting enough, we're having a better quality of life. And I think when you're seeing a fragile patient switch over, I think that's quite meaningful. But I think that also plays into a lot of what we're going to see in this trial. And I was wondering, for you, where do you see the points which are critical for patient selection criteria of this trial?
Yeah, I think the eligibility for this trial is pretty broad, which makes it attractive, I think, both for oncologists and for patients. It includes patients who have been treated with a platinum doublet and an IO agent, a PD-1 antibody in the first-line setting. Because of the availability of targeted options, patients who have known EGFR or ALK or ROS1 alterations are excluded because they would be best treated with targeted therapy. And so at the time of first progression, be that on chemotherapy with anti-PD-1 or during the phase of maintenance PD-1, patients are randomized to either docetaxel, which would be the standard of care, or to treatment with Olvi-Vec, followed by re-challenge with a platinum doublet and ICI. So a relatively novel concept here, where we're capturing patients at the time of first progression on an IO agent after platinum doublet, and then giving Olvi-Vec to the investigational arm and re-challenging with platinum doublet ICI. I think those patients who might be ideal for this would be patients who have had some period of time on maintenance immunotherapy, for example, who are some period of time out from having had platinum doublet, for example. But as I mentioned, it's a good trial in terms of eligibility because it's pretty broad and it's pretty real life, I would say, because this is a scenario we see in the clinic almost every day where patients unfortunately are having progression on IO after platinum doublet.
Where do you see maybe the key outcomes from this trial that you're most focused on?
Yeah, well, this is a randomized phase 2 trial, relatively rigorous study with a kind of key efficacy endpoint of progression-free survival. So we have a pretty good idea of what the progression-free survival would be expected to be on docetaxel. There's been probably 6-7 phase 3 trials over the last several years where PFS with docetaxel comes in the kind of 3.5 to 4.5 month range. So I think that's our benchmark. And having PFS as a primary endpoint here, particularly for a signal-seeking study, is a good one. Then the secondary endpoints are overall survival and response rate. So it'll be interesting to see, for example, can we reinduce response to platinum doublet and also potentially sustained response to IO again. So I think both of those will be important. And then, as you mentioned earlier, I think looking at the patient's quality of life and long-term outcomes in the two arms. An important element of the trial as well to note is that those patients who are randomized to docetaxel and have progression eventually on docetaxel have the potential to be treated with Olvi-Vec later. It's such a crossover. And I think that makes the trial attractive as an option for patients who are enrolling in that. There's always that possibility of receiving the investigational treatment later.
Yeah, I really wonder from that aspect how you're seeing the future landscape then of the non-small and maybe the adoption of something like an oncolytic virus for these patients? I think with the, let's call it, lack of options or what's currently available, for me personally, I do see that there is potential here, that it's great, but I think going down the road and even seeing where a lot of these patients are coming from, where do you most see this being fitting into the treatment paradigm? And do you even see it moving up potentially with time?
Yes, I think, Ankit, this is a practical setting to study Alvovec first in non-small cell lung cancer, in that this is a really high unmet need, those patients who are having progression on first-line therapy. However, if we see a signal in this group, I think it would make sense to perhaps bring it to the first-line setting. Whereas I mentioned the majority of patients are treated with platinum doublet up front, along with IO. So could it even potentiate those patients' treatment in that first-line setting and avoid primary or acquired resistance? And then there's obviously other settings you could explore as well. But I think this is a very rational setting to explore. And I think this is a good signal-seeking trial, which hopefully will lead to registrational trials at a later point, if we see that signal, which we need to see.
Absolutely. I think we're all on the edge of our seats here to see kind of where this may be going, as the patient population, as you mentioned, is looking for options. This is a high unmet need. So I think with that, though, I really want to thank you for joining me today, having this really important discussion and really seeing where we can explore the landscape even further and how Olvi-Vec may fit into the current treatment paradigm.
Great. And great to discuss this. And I look forward to seeing data emerging about Olvi-Vec.
Absolutely. Thank you so much once again.
Take care.